We talked about these things last week, but I just wanted to reiterate that, the sort of questions computer architect asks themselves are, what sort of architecture should I go for, right? And I said that the preferred thing now is register architecture or the load store architecture, because it is very much amenable to pipelining and therefore makes the processor very, fast and high performance processor. So I also said that Intel supports register memory, but actually has hardware which converts the ISA to micro instructions which are pipelined. Okay, so eventually what is actually executed is more like register architecture, even though the instruction set architecture supports register memory. Stack and accumulator are obsolete architectures. They were used once upon a time and they are not used anymore. Right. Okay, then we discussed about how do you deal with addresses. So you have the big endian, little endian formats. Once upon a time, Intel was the only little endian format, but now that everything is a clone of Intel, many of them are in, little endian, but all these processors like AMD and all are configurable. You can either configure them to be big endian or configure them to be little endian. Okay. Then alignment. There are processors which require word alignment, but the alignment that the book talks about is given an address of a variable, okay, then the address mod size of the variable should be 0. Then you say it's an aligned access. So a byte, a character variable, for example, can be from any byte in the memory, because MIPS processor allows byte addressing. So which means that you can actually address every byte in the main memory, whereas some processors are word addressable, which means that you can only address, words. So you get the first address is 0, second address is 4 and 8 and 12 and so on. You can't address 2 or 3 or something like that. Whereas in MIPS, you can address them. Okay, and if it is a character variable, then it's aligned. If it's not a character variable, then it's a misaligned access. Misaligned access leads to loss of performance. So that is one problem. But even when you're accessing aligned access, like 2-byte variable, when you actually bring into a register, the register is 64 bits. So you have to make sure that the 2 bytes are aligned correctly in the lowest significant 2 bytes, right? So that problem still remains when you are accessing different variables. So that these are the sort of things that the architect has to take care of. And then you have the various addressing modes, which all of you talked about in the last class. So how does, what is the choice of addressing modes, and how do you decide what addressing modes you will use, and what in the architecture do the addressing modes affect? When you look at it like that, when they have done some statistical analysis, they find that most of the addressing that they require are displacement immediate and register indirect. Okay. When you do that, you have anyway register operations which are normal, because that is how the operations happen. But the other addressing modes which you need are register indirect, displacement, and immediate. Now, the more the number of addressing modes that you decide to support, the more number of bits you will need in the instruction format to to indicate what addressing mode you are using. So it is therefore not very advisable to have too many addressing modes, because if you have too many addressing modes and you use too many bits in the instruction, then the instruction length becomes high, and because of that your executable code size increases. Okay, so that is the driving force behind how many addressing modes you choose. And because the most popular ones are the immediate displacement and register indirect, those are chosen. All right, so this is where I wanted to spend some time. So the addressing mode, right? So when you do a procedure call, how do you represent the target address of the procedure? So there is a jump and link register, call. So you usually specify the address of the function, right? The first instruction of the function is what you give as the address of the jump instruction. So this address that you are giving, should it be an absolute address or relative address is the question. And most of the time they use what is called as PC relative addressing. That is, what is the current program counter value? Relative to that, what is the value of this function's address? The advantage of this is that, when you do dynamic loading, then you can actually, when you do loading and you do runtime binding and all that, the relative PC relative addressing will allow you to not, have trouble with absolute addresses. See, if you use absolute addresses, then you have to load the function in that location only. Whereas if you say PC relative and we are using runtime binding, then you can actually, move the function around, right? It also helps with the dynamically linked libraries, right? So you have the dynamically linked libraries which come into the memory only when they are called. They are not otherwise loaded, right? I hope you have done, I'm sure you have done dynamic linking, dynamic loading, and your operating system scores. So that is basically the reason why you use PC relative addressing, so that there is no need to be fixed in a fixed memory location in the computer. Now, when you are returning from the procedure, you don't know where you will return. You may exit from the procedure, you may call some other function, you may, return back to the calling function, and so on and so forth. Many things are possible. So you do not know at compile time where you will return. It is only known at runtime. So for that purpose, the register indirect addressing is used for procedure returns. In addition, it is also used for the switch statement, because you don't know which of the case statements are going to be executed. Therefore, for that, you need register indirect addressing. Virtual functions in your object-oriented design, function pointers in your C, dynamically linked libraries. All of these, none of them have the target address known at compile time. Because of that, you use the register indirect addressing for all these various things. Okay, so that's the addressing mode related to procedure calls. Now, how do you decide whether you're going to take a branch or not? Okay, when you have conditional branch, so if you have a if else sort of a thing, how do you know whether you're going to take the branch or not going to take the branch? there are two possibilities. The compare and branch used to be used in the wax systems and all, which is not used anymore now. Condition code means there are certain special bits which are set based on which the processor will be able to figure out whether the condition is true or not. Whereas MIPS basically, compares a value with the value in a register. So this register is called a condition register. So you are comparing, is the value equal to 0, not equal to 0, less than 0, or less than a value, and so on. So you are basically comparing values with a particular, what should I say, the value in the register. And based on that, you are taking the branch. Okay. So Intel uses condition code, whereas MIPS uses condition register. Okay. So that is how condition branches are used. Then we have in caller and callee saving, I hope I don't have to cover because the videos cover pretty beautifully for the MIPS. But essentially the point is, if the caller is going to need those values, it will have to store them itself. Or if the callee is replacing the register values, it should store those values and restore them. So this is to make sure that you don't, because we don't have infinite number of registers. Therefore, we have to ensure that we use them effectively. Now, at this point, I think, Bharadwaj has this question about stack, saving registers on the stack, which he wanted to discuss in a interactive session. So what exactly is your problem, Bharadwaj?
Ma'am, like in the caller and callee, like after he explains the problems, like what are the problems we have with like not having the you just calling the procedures, and the callee might overwrite the registers which caller like already save some data. He told about using something called a stack there, man, like so that if you keep on pushing the values in the stack, so there won't be any this overwriting and all. But after that there was something like after that he showed the whole picture where the 32 registers, the registers, general purpose registers which are there. He divided some of them to be the caller ones and some of them to be callee.
That is the
So my
convention in
doubt
MIPS.
was, okay, ma'am.
The convention in
So
MIPS
then,
is 16 to something is, if the register number is 16 to something, caller will save. If it is something else, callee will save. That's a convention. So by doing that, there is no need for you to figure. See, it's something like this. If you are saying, I am going to reuse the, I have to reuse this register, or I need to know the value in this register after I come back from the calling function, then, called function rather, after I come back from the called function. How do I know whether that fellow is going to use these registers or not? I don't know, right? So the point is, who will save becomes a question. The callee can think the caller is saving, caller can think callee is saving. So to prevent all this confusion, MIPS made a decision that if it is these registers, the caller will save. If these are the registers, callee will save. Okay, where do they save? They save on the stack.
okay, ma'am.
Stack is basically every process has a stack. You remember your
Yes, ma'am.
process, address space.
Yes.
So process address space consists of stack, and these things are pushed onto the stack there. So if you are saving some context, right, you are pushing them onto the stack, then you will push the return address onto the stack, right? Because the instruction immediately after the return from the function, called function, that program counter value you need to push onto the stack. Okay. And then
Okay.
you push the actual parameters that you're passing to the function on the stack. Local variables will be on the stack once you enter the function. So, this is basically how it works. And then you use the variables in the function. Once you are exiting the function, you pop all the local variables. You pop the parameters, the formal parameters, and then you pop the return value. So you will be able to now return to that particular instruction. That's what he shows, right? By saying, he adjusts the stack top pointer and stores the values that, by convention are to be saved by the caller,
Ma'am,
and so
so
on.
like the stack saves all the values and all, and it will be popping and using them, and after the uh, operations are done, the values will be popped out.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, once you come into before you call the function, you push whatever you need to do, right? There are minimum some registers you need to push. And in addition, the return address that you need to push on the stack. Then you need to push the actual parameters you're passing to the function on the stack. You enter the function. The function can push more stuff or pop them. And then after the use of those is done, it will pop the values of the registers and return, right? So that's how it works.
okay. Ma'am. So if the val like in the if like there are some fixed ones for caller and calling, ma'am. If they are filled up, then will they be the previous one will be cleaned or something?
Filled up in what way?
Like if there are some 8 registers given for caller and all the 8 are filled, and if there are any like some more values to be put up, then
No, you can use all the registers, but what you save in the stack are fixed.
okay.
Who saves them is fixed, not what are saved. Who saves them is fixed.